Sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are the ones you never notice, until someone who knows better shows you how to look. There was a knot in the rope again. Every morning, as the sun stretched over Naval Support Facility Grafton, the flag ceremony unfolded like clockwork. Colors at 0700 sharp. Orders shouted crisp into the wind. A bugle call echoing against the barracks walls. Boots aligned, shoulders squared, chins high. But today, just like the day before, the rope on the secondary mast wouldn't budge. It was barely noticeable, except to one man. He stood at the base of the pole with a pair of worn work gloves tucked into the waistband of his khakis. His t-shirt, once navy gray, had faded from years of sun and salt. A wide-brimmed cap cast a shadow over a weathered face. He didn't wear a name tag. Nobody had asked. They just called him Mac. Most thought he was a contractor, maybe one of the long-term civilian maintenance hires who never really left after retirement. He never corrected them. Never spoke much at all, really. But every morning, without fail, Mac was already there, checking the rigging before the first reveille note hit the air. "Rope stuck again," muttered Ensign Delgado, watching from a distance. "Let the old guy handle it," shrugged Petty Officer Lynn. "He likes it. Shouldn't we? I don't know, offer to help." "He's got it." They turned back toward the parade prep without a second thought. The old man, after all, was always there, always fixing something, always out of sight just before the official ceremony began. Nobody ever questioned why. Mac worked the knot with practiced fingers, feeling the tension in the rope like a doctor reading a pulse. 23 years of handling lines in storms, under fire, in the dark. Some skills never leave your hands. The younger sailors saw an old man with rope. Mac felt the weight of every flag that had ever flown on his watch. The knot gave way with a soft pop. He tested the pulley system twice, ran the rope up and down to check for fraying, then stepped back into the shadows just as the formation began to gather. Same routine, same invisibility, same quiet pride in work that nobody would ever notice, unless they knew what to look for. No one remembered when Mac had first shown up on base. Maybe 2012, maybe earlier. There was no paper trail anyone could find, and most people assumed he was cleared through some obscure logistics contract. But ask around long enough, and you'd hear stories. He rewired the base PA system during a blackout. Saw him walking the roof in a storm, checking for leaks. Just him and the lightning. I heard he once repaired a comms relay with a pair of pliers and a fishing lure. He used to be in. Must have been. You can tell. But when pressed, no one knew his rank. No photo ID. No file. He wasn't in the mess hall logs. But somehow Mac had a key to every utility cabinet, a pass for every equipment shed, and the respect of every junior engineer who'd watched him silently diagnose problems they hadn't even noticed yet. What made it stranger was how normal he looked. Quiet, lanky, the kind of man who blended into the background like faded paint. But once, when a new sailor joked about his grandpa energy, the chief logistics officer had quietly replied, "Be careful. That grandpa used to walk where satellites couldn't see and came back with entire teams." Nobody joked after that. The stories multiplied over time, passed from watch to watch like folklore. How Mac had appeared during Hurricane Sandy, somehow managing to keep the backup generators running when the main power grid failed. How he'd spent 3 days straight rewiring the base communications after a lightning strike, sleeping in 4-hour shifts on a cot in the equipment room. How he seemed to know exactly which valve to turn, which breaker to flip, which cable to splice, without ever consulting a manual. "Guy's got institutional knowledge tattooed on his brain," Master Chief Rodriguez had said once. 30 years from now, when half this base is falling apart, we'll be wishing we'd asked him more questions. But Mac didn't encourage questions. He'd nod if you greeted him, sometimes offer a grunt of acknowledgement if you thanked him for a repair. He carried his coffee in a battered metal cup that looked like it had survived at least 2 wars, and he never ever sat in the mess hall during busy hours. The only time anyone had seen him truly animated was during a base inspection 6 months ago. A young lieutenant, fresh from Annapolis, had made the mistake of criticizing the sloppy maintenance standards of some older equipment. Mac had appeared seemingly from nowhere, his weathered hands moving over cables and circuits like a concert pianist warming up. "Sir," he'd said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. "This equipment has been running flawlessly for 18 years because it's been maintained by people who understand that newer isn't always better. Sometimes experience beats regulations." The lieutenant had stammered an apology, but Mac was already gone, dissolved back into the background like smoke. It was Tuesday, 0655 hours, when Base Commander Captain Sarah Chen arrived for the morning color ceremony. She'd been commanding Naval Support Facility Grafton for 8 months and prided herself on knowing every sailor, every civilian contractor, every moving part of her operation, which is why the man working on the flagpole caught her attention. She'd noticed him before, the quiet maintenance worker who always seemed to be around, but never quite present during official functions. Today, something was different. Maybe it was the way he handled the rope, with the kind of fluid precision that came from decades of muscle memory. Maybe it was how he automatically checked wind direction before adjusting the halyard tension. Or maybe it was the tattoo she glimpsed on his forearm when he reached up to test the pulley. An anchor with wings, faded but unmistakable. Navy SEALs. Captain Chen had grown up in a Navy family. Her father had been a Master Chief, her brother a career submarine officer. She knew the difference between someone who'd learned rope work and maintenance training and someone who'd learned it rappelling from helicopters in hostile territory. Mac finished his work and stepped back, just as he always did. But this time, Captain Chen was watching, really watching. The formation called to attention. The bugle sounded. The flag began its journey up the mast. Smooth, steady, perfect. No snags, no hesitation, just the way it should be. And in that moment, Captain Chen made a decision that would change everything. Instead of facing the flag with the rest of the formation, she turned toward the man in the faded t-shirt and worn cap. Before he could fade back into the shadows, before he could make himself invisible again, she raised her hand in a crisp, unmistakable salute. The effect was immediate and electric. Every sailor in the formation noticed their commanding officer saluting someone they'd barely seen. Heads turned. Whispers started. The quiet maintenance man, Mac, stood frozen for a moment, as if he'd been caught in a spotlight he'd spent years avoiding. Then slowly, his hand came up in response. Not the casual wave of a civilian contractor, not the uncertain gesture of someone unsure of protocol. It was the salute of a man who had earned the right to return it. The question started immediately. Who is that guy? Why did the captain salute him? What's his story? But Captain Chen had already walked over to where Max stood, still looking like he wanted to disappear into the nearest building. "Master Chief," she said quietly, using a title that made several nearby sailors do double takes. Mac's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. "Ma'am, been a while since anyone called me that. How long since you retired?" "Officially? 15 years. Unofficially?" He gestured toward the flagpole, the buildings, the carefully maintained equipment all around them. "Still working on it." They talked for 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. But words spread through the base like wildfire, the way news always does in close quarters. The quiet maintenance man wasn't just a contractor. He was Master Chief Petty Officer Malcolm Mac Sullivan, retired Navy SEAL with 32 years of service, 3 Bronze Stars, and a classified service record that read like a thriller novel. He'd been living in a small apartment just outside the base gates, drawing his pension and spending his days maintaining the infrastructure he'd sworn to protect. No fanfare, no recognition, no need for either in his mind. Just service, continued in the quietest possible way. By evening, the entire base knew the story. By the next morning, Mac found himself receiving nods of acknowledgement from sailors who'd never noticed him before, respectful greetings from officers who suddenly understood why their equipment always worked perfectly. The transformation wasn't immediate, and Mac didn't make it easy. For 3 days after Captain Chen's salute, he tried to return to his old routine, arriving before dawn, working in the margins, disappearing before ceremonies. But invisibility, once lost, is hard to reclaim. Sailors started lingering after their duties, asking questions about maintenance procedures they'd never cared about before. How do you know which wire goes where without checking the manual? Ensign Delgado asked one afternoon, watching Mac rewire a junction box with a kind of casual precision that made complex tasks look simple. Mac paused, considering the question with the gravity it deserved. In the teams, he said finally, you learn that manuals are written by people who've never had to fix something in the dark, in a storm, with enemy fire coming in. You learn to listen to the equipment, feel what it needs. Sometimes that's more reliable than any book. It was the most he'd said to anyone in years, and word of his philosophy spread through the engineering crews like gospel. But the biggest change came from Captain Chen herself. She instituted a new policy. Every morning's flag ceremony would begin with a moment of recognition for those who serve without recognition, who maintain and protect and preserve without asking for credit. More than that, she began what she called heritage walks, informal sessions where Mac would take small groups of junior sailors around the base, sharing the stories behind the infrastructure, the lessons learned from decades of keeping complex systems running under impossible conditions. See this conduit here, he'd say, pointing to what looked like routine electrical housing. Hurricane Katrina taught us that water finds ways you never expect. This rerouting saved us 3 days of downtime during the last big storm. The walks became legendary, with sailors requesting them as professional development. Mac never volunteered for these sessions, but he never declined them either, understanding finally that his knowledge was too valuable to take to the grave unnamed and unshared. And every morning, Master Chief Malcolm Sullivan would stand where he'd always stood. Not in the shadows anymore, but in plain sight, ensuring that the flag flew exactly as it should. The truth is, there are Master Chief Sullivans everywhere, in our communities, our workplaces, our neighborhoods. Men and women who serve with honor, then continued serving in ways we never notice. They fix what's broken, protect what matters, and ask for nothing in return except the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. The next time you see someone working quietly in the background, someone whose competence seems to exceed their title, someone who carries themselves with understated dignity, take a closer look. You might be looking at a hero who's still serving, still protecting, still making sure the flag flies straight. Sometimes all it takes is one person with the wisdom to salute first,